Hello and welcome back to the Broadway Q&A presented by Playbill and The Growing Studio. Every Monday and Wednesday, we chat with different Broadway directors, choreographers, composers, music directors, lyricists, you name it. Every Friday, we are joined with faculty from America's leading musical theater colleges. Make sure you're following us on Instagram, Playbill, and The Growing Studio for the latest information on all of our upcoming guests. Now, today's guest artist is one of the most brilliant directors of our time. Fun Home, I think, was one of the greatest musicals I've ever seen on Broadway, not to mention A Doll's House Part 2, or Seminar, or any of his brilliant productions. I am so excited to have a chat today with director Sam Gold and to ask him some of your questions. You there, Sam?
Yep, I'm here. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Great.
Where are you right now?
I'm in Brooklyn in my home.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm so happy you're here. If any of our viewers would like to ask Sam a question live, you can comment on Facebook or on YouTube, and we'll be bringing a couple of you on to the live stream today to ask Sam a question yourself. So I'd love to get started. We have so many questions for you.
Great.
This first question is from Marshall Grant from Texas. Sam, could you talk a bit about the challenges and considerations when you restaged Fun Home away from the in the round concept of Broadway for the tour?
For the tour?
Yeah.
Well, so Fun Home went through a few incarnations. The first time we did it for the public, we did it in the smallest space at the Public Theater in the Shiva for these work in progress showings. They were in a proscenium arrangement. And then we moved from there to the Newman, the larger space at the public, and that was also in a proscenium arrangement. So the tour, so then when we went to move to Broadway, we were very, very lucky to see that Circle in the Square was available. And I was very excited at the idea of trying to do it felt like the perfect way to do a show that has multiple realities simultaneously. That the round was just giving me a way to have the narrator with both Alice and in the center of the show and be able to be seen by the audience from different angles. And it just felt like it was going to work really well. And I was very excited to do it in the round. And then for the tour, obviously you can't do that. And we had a very successful production at the public in a proscenium. So it was very easy and confident to know how to move it back into a proscenium configuration. And what I wound up kind of doing is I wound up being kind of like the greatest hits production, because we kind of took things from all the iterations. So it had some ideas from the Broadway production, some ideas from the Public Theater proscenium production, and some things that we learned on Broadway that we didn't get to do on Broadway, and we kind of put it all together for the tour. So the tour was sort of what I had learned along the way, with the constraints that you always have for a tour. You have to fit on a certain number of trucks. You have to be able to load in and load out in a certain amount of time. Right. You have to fit into very large theaters, very small, there are a lot of constraints on a tour for the production, and those are like puzzle pieces that you figure out.
Have your plays toured as well?
Seminar did a little tour. Nothing. I can't think of something else that's toured.
Okay, cool. Thank you. This next question is from Joe Bowen from Queens. I loved your King Lear. I did too. I'm curious what was behind the decision to cast a deaf actor as Cornwall and make Oswald his interpreter.
The honest answer to that is I really wanted to work with Russell Harvard. He was an actor that I'd seen in multiple shows and thought was a brilliant actor. And I was trying to think of something for him. And as I was looking at the play, and Cornwall, there's this scene where Cornwall's servant rises up against him, and it struck me that scene would be very beautiful in ASL. The idea kind of came out of that, the idea that someone that was his servant, meaning his sign language interpreter, would then disobey him in that scene, and that they would play that scene out in ASL. It kind of came from there. So it was because I love actors, and I get excited about actors, and I make my work around being inspired by them. So someone is a great actor who I want to work with, and I think of something to do with them. So Russell was just in that category of people I have tried to do other things with. I had just seen him in a play, Playwrights Horizons. He was on my mind. But on a larger level, I'd say that I'm really interested in pushing the boundaries of what actors are acceptable for what roles in theater, especially on Broadway. And Shakespeare has a long history of pushing those boundaries.
Right.
And when to do a Shakespeare play on Broadway, which is a very rare thing to do, it was very important to me to make sure that any actor could be considered for any role.
Thank you. This next question is from Mark Bowden from Poughkeepsie. What makes you want to rehire an actor? That's a great question.
That's a great question. I mean, there's a million different ways to answer that question. I tend to really love actors who are co-directors. I like actors who have a sense of story. It's one of the things that's the most unique about acting for theater, is that you're not just responsible for your present tense reality. On film, you just being alive in the moment and letting the director capture your unique energy is sort of enough. But in the theater, you have to not only be honest and connected and in your character and in the moment, but you have to have some responsibility to the language, and some responsibility to the rhythm, and some responsibility to the trajectory of the storytelling. And I really love working with actors who can kind of do all of that, go back and forth, put their sort of, present tense brain on and just be in the moment, but then step out and be like, let's talk from a story point of view about this moment. Those tend to be the actors I get excited about working with over and over again.
And that comprehension of language and a deeper understanding of text, do you find that is coming from those who are trained classically?
A mix for me. I went to Juilliard and worked with a lot of people that I met when we were all in school together that got real classical training. I also really love untrained actors who have innate instinctual connection to language and character and get there on their own. I don't think there's one way to be a brilliant actor, or one way to learn how to speak verse or anything else. But when I do work with classically trained actors, I tend to work with classically trained actors who have the ability to see how those tools can help them when they need them, but not become rigid. Because I think there's a million different ways to be a great actor, and classical training can only provide certain avenues, and those can become, for some people, limitations.
Wow, that's fascinating. Really. I have a viewer here who wants to come in and ask a question, if that's okay.
Sure. Sure.
Okay.
Hi. I'm Jacob Simon. I am a current musical theater student at CCM. And my question is, before your career as a director, you originally appeared on Broadway as an actor in The Diary of Anne Frank. So what inspired you to make the transition to the other side of the table? And how has that shift changed your perspective on the industry and the art form as a whole?
That's a very deeply researched question, because very few people know that I was a replacement understudy in the 1998 Broadway revival of The Diary of Anne Frank. So it was a long time ago, and it was the pinnacle of my very short acting career. I got into theater in high school as an actor. Like most people in the theater, that's their way in. You either fall in love with theater, going to see it when you're young, in an English class, or mostly because you perform in school and when you're young. So I got into it through that, and I very quickly knew that I didn't have an actor brain. I was bossy. I was interested in all the other things. When I did Anne Frank, there was another actor in the show, Austin Pendleton, who's also a brilliant director and writer and a great mentor. And I would talk to him about theater. We would sit backstage and I'd ask him questions about his life. And he was directing Chekhov's The Seagull, I believe, during the day while he was performing at night. And it was just clear to me from talking to him, why am I acting? I'm so much more interested in having this conversation with this director about the whole picture. And he was one of the first people to really encourage me to do that. And after I finished Anne Frank, which was my very first professional experience in the theater, I immediately applied to internships as a director and made the transition. But, because I did start as an actor and acting was always sort of my way in, that is definitely the focus of my work. I start with the actors, and I think everything about the production, to me, starts with answering questions around how I'm working with the performers.
Cool.
Thank you so
much, Jacob.
Thanks, Jacob.
This next question is from Erika Ito from Kailua, Hawaii. Is there any specific training you look for from someone auditioning for a Shakespeare piece? Do you believe anyone is capable of entering the world of contemporary Shakespeare?
Yes, I very much believe that anyone is capable. People get very intimidated and scared about the language, but iambic pentameter it's a heartbeat. It's it's a rhythm that everybody knows very, very well. And the brilliance of Shakespeare is that you can enter into it through, a lifetime of scholarship and study, or picking up a play, as a, 13-year-old in your living room and getting a ton out of it. So I think everybody should be less intimidated and go, connect to those plays. Those plays contain everything. All of humanity is in those plays, and everybody should, get excited about them and interpret them and go for them and get your hands messy in them. There's no right or wrong. The guy's been dead for 400 years, and you can't mess with him. You can do anything you want with those plays. It's not going to offend him. So everybody should just get their hands dirty in them and make something with it and be inspired by a brilliant artist in whatever way, and don't be intimidated.
And do you have a favorite?
Do I have a favorite of Shakespeare's plays?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a sucker for the great tragedies. I like the big tragedies. Those plays are my favorites, all 5 of them.
Thank you. This question is from Lexi I'm going to butcher this one. Smishinsky from Pittsburgh. When filming a self-tape, how do you change the way you work from large scale, Shakespeare's Globe scale, to small scale on camera acting?
You're talking about self-taping for a Shakespeare play,
right?
I think. So I would say you don't need to scale it down. What you're auditioning for is what you should be performing, not the camera. If you're auditioning for Shakespeare outdoors in a 1,000-seat amphitheater, but you're doing a self-tape on camera, you shouldn't audition for a film of the play. You should audition for the production you're auditioning for. I tend to not worry too much about that. Auditions are flawed by definition, and if you have an honest connection to the material, that's what you should focus on. How do I want to express this material as honestly and as passionately as I can? And don't second guess yourself, and, assume that the director and the casting director can sift through, was this a good tape?
This next question is from Ciaran Walsh from Motherwell, Scotland. When choosing a text purely for audition, how much should age and casting come into your decision? For instance, if you could pull off the energy of Anthony's Let's Slip the Dogs of War, should you do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever you want.
This next question is from Nick Fizzuti from Westport, Connecticut. You have such a diverse directing history. As a director, what draws you to a project?
A lot of times it's about performance, like something in the text makes me think I would have an interesting challenge with the actors. I picture myself in a room with the actors and I think to myself, would this be interesting and challenging? What would talking to them about this play be like? Would I be asking something of them that would be meaningful? So it has to do with that. It doesn't tend to have to do with genre or subject. There isn't a huge through line in my work of like, everything I do is a light comedy, or everything tends to be about World War II. You know, I'll tackle any genre, I'll tackle any subject matter. I tend to look for things with a lot of subtext, because psychological subtext is what I like exploring with actors. So I look for things where it's complicated, where the characters are multi-dimensional, where there's depth, where there's a lot to chew on. And more in my career, as I get older, I've become more interested also in things that have cultural relevance, that try to speak to our community about things that people should show up for. Everybody's very busy. I have 2 kids. What am I leaving my kids to go do? And is it worth leaving my kids for? And for the audience members, is it worth, coming out to the theater to see? So I think more and more that kind of cultural relevance has played a role, which maybe it didn't earlier in my career.
Thank you. This question is from Chris Poole. Will there be a Fun Home movie?
I sure hope so. Yeah, we're developing it now. So we're working on how to translate that material to another medium, and we're all actively engaged in the writing, development, thought process about making that work in a new medium. But it won't be immediately. You're not going to see it in a theater immediately, but we're working on it.
How exciting. This question is from Joshua Shane Wiggins from Hamilton, New Jersey. What advice would you give for actors who want to break into directing?
I think it has a lot to do with point of view. What stories do you have to tell? Why do you want to tell a story? Why do you want to lead the room and be in charge of the room, as opposed to be a vessel for someone else's vision? So breaking into directing to me is about, if you have point of view, if you have passion for that point of view, you'll find the practical stuff. The practical stuff will come. You'll find other people that share that passion, that point of view. You'll be gravitated to see things that relate to it. You'll meet people. It's a communal art form, so it has a lot to do with the other people. Directing you don't direct alone. You're directing other people. So it has to do with forming a community. Who are the people you're working with? How do you get them excited? How do they excite you? How do you make something together? So it's about community and passion and point of view.
Thanks. This question is from Peter Glenn from Honolulu, Hawaii. Are you presently working on shows? And if so, what is that like during lockdown?
Oof, man, the theater has really been going through something right now. I was about 2 weeks shy of my first rehearsal for Chekhov's Three Sisters, adapted by Claire Barron, when New York shut down. So we would have been in performances right now for Three Sisters. And I, since shutting down, have continued to work on it. We've all met, the cast and team and I have met twice, once for a great conversation and to talk about, Chekhov actually was a doctor who wrote his plays after taking care of ill patients in the world's first pandemic. So, you know, we had a lot to talk about, and that play is very resonant right now. And then we also worked on it. We did a reading, and we're talking about doing more work just to keep everybody, you know, who were ready to get in rehearsal, keep everybody still working on the play and thinking about it so we can do the production when, you know, when Cuomo tells us it's safe. So I'm working on Three Sisters, and I'm planning things at various stages for when we can come back. I think this time has been an amazing time for having some space to really think about why it's so important for people to gather communally, what it is about that humans need. And so it's very inspiring for theater making and for, you know, it's good. I've been directing so many, you know, you go back to back from shows. It's nice to take some time and really reconsider why we do this, what's important about it, what are the stories we need to tell. You know, the protests these last couple of weeks have been a huge opportunity to really think about the necessary changes in the theater.
Yes.
And that it's, you know, it's a terrible tragedy what the country's been going through, but also there's a lot of opportunities within this time to have space to make good changes for the future.
Yeah, there's nothing but time. I have a special guest who wants to come in and ask you a question, if that's all right.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Sam.
Oh my gosh, how beautiful to see you.
How are you?
Are you in Hudson?
I am.
Great. Ooh.
Happy to see you.
It's so great to see you. How's it up there? How are you doing?
It's good. It's nice to be able to walk around.
Yeah.
But I have a question for you, and this comes from Phil White from Ohio. This is my best Rachel Maddow voice. This is my question. It's from Phil White from Ohio, and he wants to know, he says, you've directed two of my favorite productions on Broadway, King Lear and Fun Home, which coincidentally are some of my personal favorite productions on Broadway. Does your process differ when directing Shakespeare versus a musical, is the question.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, my answer to that is really that I find the director's role to be extremely different when you're working with living writers than when you're working with dead writers. So I would say that my role as a director on a musical versus a play isn't that different, though I would say on a musical, there's more cooks in the kitchen. So you're integrating more collaborators and more collaborators' vision, and music changes things. But much more importantly, I think the difference that you're asking about is the difference between making new work with writers who are writing in the room and speaking to this culture, and a writer who is speaking to a totally different culture. You know, King Lear, you know, Shakespeare was writing to a very specific culture, you know, Queen Elizabeth dead, James coming to take over England. There, you know, there was crazy shit going on in England. There was a pandemic. There was, you know, uprisings. There was Mary Queen of Scots. There's all sorts of shit going on in England at the time. And Shakespeare was writing to that audience. And the audience of the court of the King of England, for the king to see with censorship. And that has nothing to do with the audience that's coming to see my production of King Lear. The audience coming to see my production is coming with a totally different culture and a totally different relationship to the issues in the play. And it's my job to bring those two cultures together and think about what the play means to a contemporary audience. That is a very different muscle than the muscle on a new piece of work. So I find those jobs to be very different. And I treat a new production, a world premiere with the writer in the room, I treat it with a very different directorial vision and a very different philosophy than when I work on a play that many of the people in the audience have seen other productions, or where I know that the culture it was written for has changed drastically.
I'm sure they loved that answer to that question, as did I. Thank you so much.
That's it. That's all. I get to see you.
Beautiful
home briefly. Nice to see you, Michael.
Yeah, much love to you and your family.
You too.
Thank you.
That's
This
fun.
next question, this is from Paige Carlton from New York City. What nourishes and generates your creative energy during this time?
My family, you know, I'm spending so much more time with my family than usual, and that's been amazing, and I learn a lot from my kids, so that's definitely nourishing my creative energy. That's the question, right? What's nourishing me creatively during the quarantine?
Yes.
Definitely think my kids. That's the most, like, the only theater happening in my life is, you know, me putting on a tutu in my living room with my 5-year-old. I've been playing a wonderful young boy in a playground named Carlos whose toys keep breaking, and my daughter comes to fix them. So that's the kind of theater I'm making.
That's fantastic.
But it's been great. It's been a great chance. Like I said before, it's like you go through these terrible times, and there's a kind of cleansing energy that happens during that dark period. And some of the darkest periods of my life personally have been the most transformative. So I'm trying to listen to that and try to hold myself to, you know, earning a place at the table in a world that's gone through a lot. So I'm trying to listen to that a lot.
This next question is from Matthew Gold from London. Maybe your cousins. I find that I really struggle with identifying different meters in Shakespeare: trochee, anapest, dactyl. How can I best learn to notice these moments in the verse, and how can I best use them to my advantage?
You know, it's hard in a format like this to help you with that question. There's a really easy way where you mark your script for the verse. You know, these plays, some of it's in verse and some of it's in prose, and you have to notice that and mark the script in a certain way. There's a million books that you can utilize for help with that. But what I'd also say is to go back to something I said earlier, which is not to be intimidated. When you break down a script and you look at the iambic pentameter and you look for the ways Shakespeare's using irregularities within that, that's all just information. It's something you can take from. It can inspire you. Oh, I want to make something of that. I'm learning from that. But it's not like you're going to get it wrong if that isn't the most important thing to you. There's a million. I meant to say this in the last time we were talking about this, but the most memorable production of Shakespeare I ever saw was done by high school students in Bushwick. It was called the Real People Theater. And it was a bunch of kids who hadn't been exposed to it much, and they were given the opportunity with a really wonderful director, teacher, to do these plays. And they could, when they got their character assignment, they had the choice to speak Shakespeare's verse, originally how it was written, to rewrite it in their own words, like what it means to them.
Wow.
And to perform it in Spanish.
Wow.
So it was like Shakespeare, contemporary English, and Spanish mixed together. And they did Hamlet. I saw Hamlet. I saw King Lear. I saw one other. They were my favorite Shakespeare productions I ever saw.
Wow.
So,
do you know what's the school called? So just so we can list it.
You know, it doesn't exist. This program doesn't exist anymore.
Too bad.
It was at Bushwick High School, I believe, but it wasn't at school. It was like an after school program that somebody brilliant developed and is long gone. I wish I could recommend it, but for anyone out there, you know, who wants to go into schools and do Shakespeare with teenagers, to me, that's like the best Shakespeare you'll ever see.
This next question is from Osmar Martinez from Nueva Ciudad Herrero, Tamaulipas, Mexico. Any advice to feel more confident when auditioning for Shakespeare?
Be yourself. You know, you find the reason you're passionate enough to go through this very challenging and demoralizing process of auditioning, there's a reason you're doing it. There's a reason you're going through that process. Connect to that honestly. Bring yourself as honestly as you can. If you're trying too hard and trying to live to other people's standards or the things you think you should be doing, you're not being yourself. It's not about what you should be doing. It's about connecting to something deep inside of you and doing it as honestly as you can, so people get a glimpse of you and your passion.
Right. I think as actors, a lot of times we try to adapt based on what we think a team wants. Maybe we are.
You'll never know the answer to that.
Right.
You'll never know what I want. You'll never be able to get inside my head and guess at, oh, he's looking for this. Oh, I saw him do this other thing, so this is the kind of thing I should do for Sam Gold.
Right.
You're never gonna guess, and I'll know if you are probably.
Right.
You just have to be yourself, and that might not be what I'm looking for. And that's a good thing. That means we didn't wind up doing something together under the wrong circumstances. Right. I think there's an irony because you're pretending for a living, but I think the more honest you can be in pretending, the better.
So if an actor is an Autolycus just by nature and they come in for Lysander, should they still bring that same energy to Lysander?
Sure. I might be like, wow, I never thought of Lysander that way, but that's a brilliant idea. I get my ideas from the actors.
Right. That's great. Thank you. We have another viewer who wants to come in and ask a question.
Hey guys. Hi Sam. I hope you guys are both doing okay with everything. My name is Alex Carr. I just graduated from Montclair State University last year. And I wanted to know, because I know you work a lot with Annie Baker and you've, got this affinity for her work. So I wanted to ask, what is it that you learned most from working with her and with her material?
So, I mean, everything, Annie and I came, we started out together. We were young and passionate and inexperienced when we met each other, and we made a lot of work together. And so I feel like everything I know as a director sort of comes out of that. I think we were very lucky that we shared taste. And to be a young person who's looking for collaborators who share taste and who share a sense of humor, share why you like live theater, that is what makes good work. What makes good work is collaborators who share something ineffable that, we couldn't even put it into words. We couldn't have looked for it. I couldn't have put an ad out saying, this is what I'm looking for. We just found each other and we were very lucky. So there was something about being young and having an angry and passionate sense of what theater could be that happened to be the same. I'm not sure I could put into words what it was necessarily, We were really interested in the performance of everyday life, the way we saw choreography in people sweeping a movie theater. And then conversely, the way we saw, very natural behavior within performing, in an acting class, the real shit that comes out between people in between the lines. So Annie always had an amazing context to explore those things. She always found a situation and a geographic location, an architectural location, and a sort of choreographic mode to explore those things that had to do with, the word simulacro is one we talked about a lot early on. And silence was another word, we were really interested in what performances in silence. Yeah, she inspired me in so many ways. It's hard to even articulate. It's like who I am has so much to do with her influence.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, you guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Alex.
This next question is from Annette Barrios from Florida. Hi, Sam. What's a good exercise way to get oneself out of old habits and rhythms?
I'm trying to guess at the context of that question. Like, are you an actor saying,
Yes, I imagine this person is an actor. They have some habits that they want to get rid of, and they're just not sure how to.
Mm. Maybe take the pressure off yourself to be able to do that. And maybe because I'm a director, this is always going to be my answer, but maybe look to other people to push you. Say to an acting teacher or the director you're working with, or your scene partner if you're working on scenes, this is something I can't get myself to stop doing, and I know I need to. Or choose material that would make it so you couldn't do that. My habit is, relying on my beautiful, booming voice, and I just wind up booming everything because I have this beautiful voice. Well, choose some very soft-spoken character who's all about silence. Try to push yourself by, giving yourself those constrictures.
It's awesome.
It's a hard question. I'm not sure.
That's okay. I can't go back and ask. This next question is from Noel Cornelius from Elon University. How can we adapt Shakespeare's work to excite modern audiences and keep it evolving as society evolves without disrespecting his original text?
Well, one thing is, why are we so worried about disrespecting his original text? Disrespect it is what I'd say. Why does it need... If you want to do it, it's because you respect it. You're not going to do it out of disrespect. So I feel like embedded in that question is not about respect. It's the sense of convention. What you're really asking is, do we need certain conventions that are assumed to be correct to do Shakespeare, or can we work outside of those conventions? It's not about respect or disrespect. There's no way to disrespect them. To disrespect it would be to say, I hate this shit and I'm not going to do it. If you're doing it, it's because you care and it speaks to you in some way. So you're not going to disrespect it. And I think too many people are affected consciously and subconsciously by conventions of the theater that aren't being thought of as simply conventions. How do we treat Shakespeare right now in America? How do they treat Shakespeare in a kabuki production? If you were living in a different culture in a different time, you would be asking totally different questions about how to respect Shakespeare. So everything should be on the table. The only thing that you can't do is neglect your passion.
That's beautiful. Don't neglect your passion. We should do a thing for it. This question is from Jordan Rich from Atlanta. Is it okay to use high stakes pieces for initial auditions? See Romeo, 'Tis Torture and Not Mercy, or better to do something that is closer to the cuff?
So funny, when I was an actor and when I was a teenager, that speech was my audition piece. That's so funny. Yeah, do whatever you connect to. High stakes, low stakes, reinvent it, do the most famous thing in the world. Some people say, like, don't do that speech. Everybody does that speech. But if you come in and do it and I care, it doesn't matter that I've heard it 100 times. And not only that, it doesn't matter if you reinvent it. You could do a speech I've heard 1,000,000 times and do it with nothing, tricky about it, and it could be amazing. Or I could be like, oh my God, I've heard this 1,000,000 times, get this person to stop. That's just about whether you're connecting beautifully to the material. So just don't second guess. Do what you have to just have an honest connection and not worry about whether you're making the right or the wrong decision. You might be making the wrong decision, so you just have to get over that.
This question is from Edwin De Vargas from the Bronx. What major changes have you seen in the industry from your beginnings to now?
Well, the death of off-Broadway is a big one. I mean, the extreme corporatization of the theater, that has really happened over my time in the theater, where the cost of making theater in New York is skyrocketed, and the ability to make work that isn't inside a commercial marketplace, that isn't pushed by monetary concerns, has definitely changed. It's the death of the avant-garde. It's the death of off-Broadway. It's the rule of a corporatization. It used to be that nonprofit theaters had board members who raised money through individuals who cared about the theater and subscribers that cared about the theater and wanted to come see work. And that's starting to go away. And what you're seeing instead is that corporations, commercial producers, corporate and commercial entities are driving the commerce, the fundraising that makes theater. So you're getting less adventurous work, or you're getting less work that can survive without money behind it. Less work that can survive without stars attached, without name recognition, without reasons that can be brought to corporate entities or commercial entities for why to do it. I think that's changed in a major way. There's no commercial off-Broadway theater anymore. The subscriber theaters are really changing. And classic theater, theater that isn't new, revivals are getting very hard to do without stars.
And do you, after we get through this pandemic, which we will get through, do you see that shifting in the same way, or do you think we'll go back to older times?
I mean, I think right now we're having a major conversation about white supremacy in the theater, and I sure hope that that conversation has major and lasting changes to the theater.
Right.
And that, so number one is about that to me. Can theater hear the anger from the Black community right now and make major structural systemic changes to deal with white supremacy? That to me is a huge question.
I hope it happens, as we all do. This question is for Sierra Castile from Detroit, Michigan. Are there any companies specifically you'd suggest for progressive Shakespeare theater?
Companies?
Yes.
Companies for progressive Shakespeare theater. In New York, New York's the community I really know. Progressive Shakespeare theater. That's you should start one. It's hard. Having a Shakespeare company in New York is very hard. There's very few of them. The Public Theater does a lot of Shakespeare, what I call a progressive. It has some progressive tendencies. Joseph Papp was a progressive and made major changes to the casting process of Shakespeare that's had huge ramifications, and the Public Theater is still living within that paradigm. But I'm not sure I would call it progressive in all ways. And can I think of a lot of other more progressive Shakespeare companies in New York? There's not a lot of Shakespeare companies here, and I don't know the rest of the country that well. So let's try to push for some more progressive Shakespeare companies, or somebody, send me the names that I'm not thinking of that I should know better. Maybe it's my ignorance.
I have another guest who'd like to come in and ask you a question.
Hey.
Oh my God.
Okay, this question is from Jalissa James from Topeka, and Jalissa would like to know and say that Fun Home was incredible. Jalissa says, I've seen many of your plays, but musicals just move me more. What drew you to directing Fun Home?
Before I answer that question, I just want to go back to the previous question about Shakespeare companies in New York, because you're now looking at the director who is making progressive Shakespeare and who you should all be supporting, because that Whitney will be, if someone has $1 million out there to start a Shakespeare company in New York, give it to Whitney to make Shakespeare, because she makes very progressive and very brilliant Shakespeare, and in fact showed me a clip of something she's working on this morning that was brilliant. So there's the best answer to that question.
Whitney, how can we follow you? Do you have a website or an Instagram handle?
Sam, thank you. Yeah, my website's like Whitney, like Houston, -white, like the color. theater.com. That's me.
We'll have it below in a second for all of our viewers.
So wait. So your question. The question from Jalissa James from Topeka. Jalissa wants to say that Fun Home was incredible. Jalissa says that they've seen many of your plays, but musicals move me more. What drew you to directing Fun Home?
First of all, I was a huge fan of all three of the originating artists, Alison Bechtel. I mean, Fun Home, that graphic novels, I think, and Are You My Mother, two of the greatest pieces of literature. I mean, they're just unbelievable books. And then Janine Tesori and Lisa Crone, I was huge fans of both of those. 2.5 Minute Ride and Well were extremely influential to me. Caroline or Change was extremely influential to me. And I was just dumb lucky to be on an artist retreat in Ojai, California, while they were just starting to figure out how to adapt the book. How are we going to take this graphic novel memoir and make musical theater out of it? And that question formally was so exciting to me. A graphic novel is a story told in multiple ways simultaneously. You've got the image, so you're being told story visually. You have the thought bubble. You have the caption. You have the montage between cartoons, and you have the page turn. So you have all of these ways of telling story. And theater is durational, especially musical theater. It's linear and durational. And those two things are so different. And trying to rectify those two things and bring a little of one to the other was, that was like the most enticing thing. I was like dying for that project just as a fan. I was like, I wish you guys the best. And I didn't have any reason to think they'd ever bring it to me. And so I just got dumb lucky that they, we just chatted over, drinks in Ojai about the project with me not thinking I'd ever direct it. And then it just worked out. Like I've been saying on this, to these questions a lot, it has to do with honest passion. I was honestly passionate. I loved it. I loved everything about the people and the material, and that came through to the writers who were looking for a director.
Whitney, you directed Our Dear Dead Drug Lord, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
That shook me like nothing else. I went to high school with Alexis Sher, and that production was just so phenomenal.
Thank you. I loved it. Thank you.
It was unbelievable.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye, Whitney.
Sam, this next question, let me just pull it up. It's from Genevieve Lagos from New York City. My dream is to be on Broadway. I'm getting up there and I've had some success, but I haven't had my big break. Do you have any tips or advice?
This is an actor asking advice about getting to Broadway?
Correct.
You don't need advice from me. You just keep doing what you're doing, and you have no idea what will get you there. The least likely thing in the world will be the thing that gets your big break. Like we were just talking about how I got involved with Fun Home. It was like, it was a graphic memoir lesbian cartoon to be done at the smallest theater at the public. I didn't do it because I thought it was going to make it to Broadway. I would have said there's no way it was making it to Broadway when we started working on it. When I have taken jobs because I thought, oh, well, this is going to get me to Broadway, it hasn't been the case.
Right. This last question is from Lori Haru from Rhode Island. Lori wants to know, what is your proudest accomplishment?
Well, it definitely, have to answer that question with my family more than my work. It's really hard to be a parent and an artist, more so for women. So all of my privilege aside, I would say my proudest accomplishment has been being able to pursue an artistic and creative life and try to contribute something to my community through making work as a parent.
That's beautiful. I'm about to be a parent, and I'm so excited. I'm sure it's my
Congratulations.
proudest accomplishment as well. Thank you. Sam, thank you so much for joining us. It is such a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. Good luck with the series.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Okay, you too.
To all of our viewers, on Monday, we are joined by choreographer Andy Blankenbuehler. We are so excited. On Wednesday, we are joined by director Jack O'Brien. Tomorrow on Instagram Live at 4 o'clock on Playbill's Instagram Live, I'll be having a conversation with Shoshana Bean about her experience at CCM and what that was like for her in college. This Friday, we are chatting with CCM and Ohio Northern University at 1 p.m. on Playbill. Please follow us on Instagram, and I hope we see you then. Thanks.